Welcome to everyone here, those of you who are here physically and those of you who are here virtually at this inaugural Melbourne Climate Futures Summit. I'm Peter Christoph. I'm a Senior Research Fellow with MCF, and I'll be emceeing for most of today and sort of facilitating, which is this extremely rich and very detailed program. It's so nice to see so many people actually here learning to re-socialise, to develop sociability. I'm like probably the rest of you, I'm recovering from a number of ACL injuries, which is Australian COVID lockdown. So we'll get through this together. Before anything else, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people, and on our collective behalf, I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to welcome all other First Nations folk who might be here with us today, either present today here or virtually online. Needless to say, in an audience like this, we've gone from catastrophic weather through to IPCC reports about future prospects. Almost every day we find some mention of climate change almost on the front pages or on the front pages. Fires, hurricanes, floods. Climate change has become an increasingly urgent issue over the past 3 decades, and current research paints a dire picture of what our future might be in the absence of dramatic, substantial, globally effective and coordinated climate policy and action. There is some momentum for change, but we are a long way behind what we need to do and what we have to do. There have recently been some legal wins slowing some of the more egregious attempts to develop further gas and coal deposits, including in Australia, and some wins which promise compensation for those who've been affected by past use of fossil fuels. We also, as we all know, mercifully have a new government here in Australia, and the opportunities for meaningful policy and action have improved. Researchers inside and outside academia and activists continue to innovate and develop new ideas, and we've seen industry, local communities and governments increasingly taking up those ideas. Universities are a critically important part of this process of developing momentum. We know that with immediate, effective and very ambitious action, we might improve the prospects for a safer climate for ourselves and for future generations. Melbourne Climate Futures, MCF, has been established to bring together the breadth of the University of Melbourne's research, together with voices in the policy sector, the community at large, industry, Indigenous peoples and youth, in order to work towards this larger goal of a safer climate by supporting multidisciplinary climate action and fostering the next generations of climate researchers and activists. And this very full and very rich program that we're going to be going through today and experiencing today, the inaugural MCF Climate Future Summit will offer a terrific opportunity for us all to share ideas and to continue this work together. I just want to make a few housekeeping points, if I may, before we proceed. Firstly, today's event's being photographed and filmed for our virtual audience out there somewhere. And should you not want to have your photograph taken, please let one of our event coordinators know. Secondly, while we're going to be using our phones, I hope to sort of send messages both to each other and also through Slido. Please put your phones on silent. Catering is going to be provided by a local Indigenous caterer, Mabu Mabu, and it's fully vegetarian. You're welcome to take home leftover food at the end of the day. Anything left after that will be picked up by the food rescue organisation Oz Harvest. And for good environmental reasons, there's no printed program. Scan your QR code. Please use refillable water bottles and keep cups if you can during the whole day. And you'll be interested to know everyone's name badge is made of mixed herbs, so you can take it home and plant it. Or if you get really hungry, you can eat it during proceedings. Bathrooms that are located on the outside and to your right, and should there be an emergency, not related to anything any of the speakers say, please remain calm and follow the instructions to leave through the multiple doors around us. Please tweet and post throughout the day using the hashtag Climate Future Summit and tag @MCF UniMelb. We were to have a welcome to country from Uncle Dave Wandon, who will, I hope, be here a little later on, and we'll do it when he does arrive. But in his absence at this point in time, I think we'll begin to move on. Last year, in 2021, this university committed to new ambitious emissions reductions targets. It's pledged to achieve carbon neutrality by 2025, including on Scope 3 emissions, and to achieve climate positive status, in other words, to remove more emissions from the atmosphere than we're emitting by 2030. In May this year, its Sustainability 2030 plan was released, outlining these targets as well as a series of additional initiatives for teaching, research and graduate-related activities aimed at addressing the climate crisis and to accelerate the transition to sustainability, including by supporting researchers to design and conduct research in line with best practice sustainability principles. For instance, we're currently reviewing air travel for academics as part of our efforts to reduce travel emissions related to research, a long overdue initiative. For the opening address to this conference, I'd like to welcome our Vice-Chancellor, the University, Professor Duncan Maskell. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Peter. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which we gather for this conference. I pay my respects to Indigenous elders, past and present, and I acknowledge all Indigenous people who are in the room today, and indeed who will be participants of today's Climate Futures Summit at the University of Melbourne. I extend a very warm welcome to everyone who is joining us for the summit, both those here in person and, as Peter says, those who are online. If there's anybody online who's just around the corner, if you fancy coming in to be in person later, that would be great too. Anyway, in making some brief remarks this morning, I want to speak about something that's very dear to my heart as a university leader, and that is the importance and value of being actively engaged as an institution in tackling the great needs of our time. I think there is no greater need than the existential threat that climate change presents in so many ways. There are many challenges that climate change brings, and there are many challenges to how we have to deal with it. But I believe that a university like ours has a public duty to lead the way where we can, and both climate change research and climate action are obvious areas where we have to show this leadership. I think there are many possible ways to show that leadership, and one that I'm very pleased with and very proud of is, as Peter just alluded to, the sustainability plan to 2030. When we started thinking about having the Melbourne Climate Futures activity or umbrella or whatever you want to call it, it was obvious that we couldn't just do that and think we'd done a great job of putting a banner up. We had to actually take action ourselves to ensure that our house was in order. And so a great deal of work was done by a lot of people to generate sustainability plans to 2030. And I'll share with you, I hope I'm not boasting, but I'll share with you that several people have talked to me outside the university and said that they think it's absolutely terrific and possibly a model of the kind of plan that institutions like ours should have. So that's a testament to the hard work that a lot of people put into it. But it does hold us to very ambitious targets. You know, we are going to hit those targets. I'm determined about that. But it's going to be a considerable amount of hard work. So just as we want to be a leader in many areas, this is one of those areas. And I think there is a clear focus that we have to take on three separate and connected domains of action. And these are amplifying our sustainability action through our campuses and our communities, mobilizing our immense institutional knowledge resources to help accelerate the shift to global sustainability, and also demonstrating that we believe in and understand sustainability through the way that we conduct our own operations. As you've just heard, as part of this, we have committed to carbon zero by 2025, and that's pretty soon. And beyond that, to become climate positive by 2030. I hadn't really even heard about climate positive until we did this, but now I know all about it. And that's an ambitious target. It's going to cover all of the difficult areas. It's going to cover our investment portfolio, for example. We're going to look at that. And it requires from all of us in the university strong commitment, innovative thinking, bold creativity, and a very disciplined focus on all of these goals. I hope that when we do achieve these things, it will be a fitting expression of the leadership role that a university like ours can play in the world today. I also think that a very important thing that we can do as a leading university is to convene, bring together knowledge experts, public authorities, creative voices, and thinkers from diverse places and diverse discipline backgrounds, and that's really important. So to bring those people together, to work together in shaping even better responses to major problems in the world. And that convening power is something very important about a university like this, and something we really have a responsibility and duty to use carefully in these kinds of areas. So I think the summit today is a great example of what this convening power can look like, with an absolutely brilliant and diverse range of speeches and participants who will bring extremely valuable perspectives to discussion on a matter of great moment. I'm delighted that the summit will have representation of Indigenous and of international perspectives, of course. And I also look forward to the opening presentation, of course, from our wonderful director of Melbourne Climate Futures, Professor Jackie Peel, in a few moments. The work that Jackie and her colleagues are doing with Melbourne Climate Futures is truly one of the most exciting things happening at the university right now. I've strongly believed during the 4 years that I've now been here at Melbourne that we should be doing as much work as possible across faculty boundaries. Our deans and our senior leaders in the university are very much on board with that thinking. And since 2019, at least, we have all seen clearly that climate is an area where we can and should be leading in a very cross-disciplinary way. It's been a huge boost to the project that Jackie, who is a leading academic from Melbourne Law School, very deeply versed in environmental law and related areas, has been able to take charge of that initiative. I'm a natural scientist. I know that climate change is to some degree a technological scientific problem with technological scientific solutions. But I think that's only a small element, actually, of the overarching picture. I think that climate change is very much a social science problem. We have to have perspectives from law, from ethics, from social policy, from policy making, and a number of other vital humanities and social science areas. And we need to understand those dimensions, and we need to work out how to fix those things just as much as we need to work out how to fix how we harvest the sun in a better way. I've seen in my own research career that quite often the big challenge is not just about understanding the science, crucial of course how that is, it's about bringing together a bunch of different disciplines to ask the right questions at the right time. And then once we start to get to solutions, to work out how best to make sure that those solutions are adopted and used. And I think that's why we have to have a cross-disciplinary approach to these kinds of big issues. One of the unique features of a university like ours is its comprehensiveness. And if we can bring that full comprehensiveness to bear in innovative ways about these big questions of our time, then I think we will be making a truly important contribution. And that's what we're here for. So I think that Melbourne Climate Futures is making exactly this kind of contribution. I think today's summit is an opportune showcase for this to be seen at work. And with all that said, it is actually just great to welcome everyone here to this Melbourne Climate Futures Summit. So welcome. Thank you all for being here and for participating. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Vice-Chancellor. Look, it's my great pleasure now to introduce two speakers, the first of whom is Jackie Peel, whom I think is known to most of you, I hope is known to most of you. Professor Jackie Peel is the director of MCF, Melbourne Climate Futures, and has been a professor at Melbourne Law School for some time now. She's a fearless and tireless leader of this august institution, MCF. She's a leading internationally recognised expert in the field of environmental and climate change law, and elected fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia. She's published very widely in climate and environmental law, including leading monographs on climate litigation and principles of international environmental law. Among her many professional roles, and this is an exhausting list that I will reduce, Jackie has served as a co-chair of the American Society of International Law's Signature Initiative on Climate Change, and she is a leading author in Working Group 3 of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 6th Assessment Report. Jackie was a Fulbright and Hauser Scholar at NYU, New York University, and has held visiting scholar positions at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Woods Institute for Environment at Stanford University. This year, she's also directing the Centre for Studies and Research Program on Climate Change and International Law at the Hague Academy of International Law. This university is also absolutely nothing without its students. It's an obvious point, but a really critical one, and it's so nice to actually have students back on campus again. They represent part of the next generation, and it's sort of exhausting and sad in some senses to have to say that the university has now produced several generations of leaders who were all born after the issue of climate change became a major public policy issue in 1992, when the Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed 30 years ago. We've been at this for a very long time. The energy, the enthusiasm, the activism of our students is a critical part of this next step in taking up this challenge. So I also want to introduce Thea Shields, who's a Juris Doctoral student here at this university and a Wattle Fellow. She's interested in strategic climate litigation and empowering young environmental activists to gain greater knowledge about their legal rights and capacity to influence political process. She's passionate about the access to climate justice and sees the law as a powerful and fundamental pillar in our society, which also has a critical role to play in solving the climate crisis. Thea is also a coordinator of Extinction Rebellion's Vic Legal, where she assists in legal representation for activists arrested for protesting political and social inaction on climate change. Very important stuff. Thank you to both, please.
Thank you. I also acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on whose land I study, and recognise that this land has held structures of law for thousands of years before our legal system was transported here. I acknowledge that the law continues to disproportionately affect First Nations people, and I honour the activism and work of those who came before me. In particular, I want to acknowledge those on the front line who are already seeing their ancestral lands and waters suffer devastation wrought by our rapidly changing climate. At the launch of the university's new sustainability plan in May, I spoke of losing my family home to the unprecedented flooding in northern New South Wales that occurred on the first day of semester 1 this year. I returned home to visit last weekend. Nearly 8 months on, my mother is still sleeping in a friend's garage while our house remains uninhabitable from the mixture of mud and sewage that tore through the building. But we know that we were one of the lucky ones. Children have lost their homes and their school, a school that stood there proudly for over 100 years. There is no plan to rebuild, and no replacement has been provided. Our community lost electricity, fresh water, and phone reception for weeks. 6 of our neighbours lost their lives. Like thousands of others around the world right now, the sound of rain on a tin roof will never sound like a lullaby again. My hometown of Mullumbimby, like Mallacoota before, demonstrates that the issue of climate change is no longer hypothetical. The impacts of our warming world are already being felt to extremes around this country, and we know that the time for action is long overdue. The work associated with this summit, as well as the university's wider support of climate initiatives, is therefore extremely important to me. This is important to me not only as a student here, but as a young person facing a future of increasing climate instability. Beyond being a professional interest and the subject of my career specialisation, climate change has become the all-pervasive feature that will define my lifetime. Knowing that in this room stand many of those responsible for developing climate solutions that may help address this instability, I feel an immense sense of gratitude. With the fantastic seminars and opportunities for productive discussions offered today, the weight of this often overwhelming climate anxiety is lessened somewhat as I look around and see more and more reasons for hope. I would say no pressure, but... Last year, I had the honour of being selected as one of the inaugural Wattle Fellows for the 2021 cohort here at the university. The fellowship is a year-long leadership development program for students to build leadership skills, support action on climate, and create a cohort of leaders with the skills and networks to create positive environmental impacts. As fellows, we participated in retreats, workshops, and events, and had the opportunity to implement our own action project. But above all, the fellowship provided the opportunity to bring together other young people who are committed to the same goal. In the face of such alarming crisis, dedicated spaces to connect, encourage, and empower one another are increasingly important. I hope today can leave us all with a similar feeling of renewed inspiration, hope, and determination. Now, with personal experience of what future climate harms might mean for us, the impact of seeing you all here, with a focus on climate solutions cannot be overstated. The various industries and leaders here today all have a critical role to play to achieve rapid but sustainable action to confront climate change. And I hope that we can all act on it as though our homes and our lives depend upon it. Thank you.
She's a very hard act to follow, Thea. Thank you very much. And thank you to the VC for his opening remarks as well. I'd also like to add my acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to any Indigenous colleagues, First Nations peoples who are joining us here today. I'm really delighted to be opening this first inaugural summit for Melbourne Climate Futures, and I'd personally like to welcome all of you who are joining us either in person, and so fantastic to see so many people in person, and also to our online audience. Melbourne Climate Futures, as the Vice-Chancellor spoke about, is the University of Melbourne's new multidisciplinary climate initiative that brings together academics and students from across all fields. And it truly is all fields across the university to contribute to solutions for the practical challenges ahead. We framed our mission around accelerating transition to a positive climate future. And that requires thinking about how our research and knowledge can be applied to shape solutions, and also necessitates working in partnership with government, with industry, civil society, as clearly the climate change challenge is not one that is going to be solved by any one discipline. It requires multiple disciplinary knowledges and multiple contributions from different actors in society. As we sit within a leading educational institution, Melbourne Climate Futures objectives also embrace nurturing the next generation. And I think Thea is a good example, the Wattle Fellows who are here today and the youth panel we'll hear from later, of the rich perspectives that we have from our student body. And I hope that we discharge the faith that you're showing in us in coming here today for this event. As the Vice-Chancellor spoke about at the University of Melbourne, we also see it as an imperative that efforts to grow and influence leaders on climate change are matched by our own efforts and commitment to action, including our targets for reducing our carbon footprint on campus and contributing to developing graduates equipped with the knowledge of sustainability that's going to be necessary for the workforce of the future. The purpose of our summit today, which we hope will become an annual event, is to bring together these diverse voices to think about a collective vision for a livable climate future and what action is needed to get there. In the climate space, we're often focused on the granular detail of technologies and policies, and for many years in Australia, we've also experienced significant denial around the findings of the climate science and policy inaction at the federal level. Since the May federal election, here in Australia, there's definitely a new sense of momentum to address climate change and to chart a course for a more hopeful climate future. And that sense has been really palpable. This event is designed to contribute to that conversation by opening up our perspectives to a bigger picture and focusing on the roles that different parts of society are playing and can play as we move forward. In that task of moving forward, we'll definitely need innovation and transformative action from across our societies and economies. And as Professor Ross Garnaut, who's going to be one of our keynotes in a later session, has discussed in his new book, Superpower Transformation, we're also going to need policies that ensure fairness and justice, including for First Nations communities, and for neighbouring Pacific and small island countries. And I'm really delighted that we'll have Mr. Henry Puna, the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum, addressing us later today. Just as important, though, I think will be the more intangible things, maintaining hope, as my colleague Professor John Wiseman has written about, building resilience, and perhaps most of all, courage. The North American poet and author David White has written that to be courageous is not necessarily to go anywhere or to do anything, to run bravely against opposing fire or flood, or to do something under besieging circumstance in order to be celebrated in story, rewarded with medals, given the accolade. Rather, to be courageous is to make conscious those things we already feel deeply, and then to live through the unending vulnerabilities of those consequences. To embrace our climate future with courage, we need to understand what we deeply care about, and to live up to and into the necessities of relationships that are often already existing. That might be with children, with family, with people, with country, with a future. I hope in our discussions today about what vision we have for our climate future that we can certainly reflect on the practical, what the science says, what technologies exist, what policy options are, how different groups can lead, but also on what values underlie that effort, what we really care about, and how to align our actions with that gravitational pull. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our summer discussions today.
Thanks very much, Thea and Jackie. It's a difficult balancing act, isn't it, between despair and hope? And I think that Thea really touched on it very articulately, that the confrontation that we're having literally on a daily basis, some of us very much in our personal lives, with the despair and the difficulties of grappling with climate change as it now affects us personally, and the anxiety that flows from that, has to be countered by and has to be overwhelmed by, I'd suggest, by a version of hope which is actually deeply grounded in reality, not a Pollyanna-ish hope about a future which we think we should perhaps achieve, but a hope which we can actually construct through very, very hard work in the circumstances that we now face.